Good morning, friends. It is a typical Grays Harbor day today with a little bit of a mist in the sky and looking like it can turn into a downpour just about any second. But today we are going to be experimenting with some interesting pieces of camera equipment, some fun combinations, and we're just going to head down the road to a spot on the East Hoquiam River that I've been eyeing every time I drive by. I think it's going to make a great composition and a great subject for the equipment that we have here today. Let's head down there, and I can't wait to share the results with you guys. Bodie's coming with us today too. Say hi, Mr. Mans. So we're at the spot now. Bodie's patiently waiting with me. Unfortunately, it is raining, so we're going to have to get the equipment ready inside the van here and kind of make do with what we got. Speaking of which, I think the vantage point or the composition that I've had in my head that I've been imagining, was from the viewpoint of my driver's seat in the van here, and it's pretty far up there. I went down to the riverside on the bank and the composition really just wasn't there, so what I think we're gonna have to do is actually pull the van forward, and I'm going to hop up on the roof with the ladder on the back there and set up the tripod to get some extra height and what we can make. Huh, Bodie? What do you think? You good boy? Bodie's gonna stay inside the van. Normally he comes with me, but we're along Highway 101, so probably not the best idea for him to get out with me. Anyways, let's go get set up. Okay. So while Bodie and I are waiting for this rain to die down, I think it'd be a perfect opportunity to talk about our sponsor, Squarespace. With Squarespace, you can build a beautiful website and set... I'm just kidding, I don't have a Squarespace sponsorship, but if there's somebody from Squarespace that's looking, I'm your guy. Anyways, no, I think it'd be a great opportunity to head over to my website where I will have a full review or write-up rather of the equipment that I'm using, as well as higher resolution images for your viewing pleasure. So let's actually talk about the equipment that we're using today. So I have a Toyo Field 4x5 camera here with a 210mm f/6 lens, which is going to be your standard to long focal length for your 4x5 systems. This lens was sold by Calumet as a beginner's lens, so it's not the best lens out there. It's a relatively simple element design. However, it yields great results for pretty much all purposes. And on the back here I actually have a GFX 50R from Fujifilm, which is a medium format digital camera. I decided to go with the GFX system for the price point and some of the options I was looking at with full frame. It made a little more sense for the applications and work that I've been doing recently. And it's been great. I love the camera. It's got its quirks. It's been a learning curve. Something I really love about these mirrorless systems is the ability to adapt lenses. All sorts of lenses. You can use 35mm lenses on the medium format system, as well as other film medium format lenses that you can adapt on there to get some of their qualities, like the Pentax or the Mamiyas or the Hasselblad lenses. I am a sucker for adapting lenses. There's something about it. I think each of the lenses have their own inherent qualities to them that make them special, and a lot of lenses were handmade, so you have their own little quirks. They can have their own little characteristics that make each of them so special. That's why on like point and shoot 35mm cameras, each one's going to be a little different even if it's the same model. And that has to do with the lenses. And when I got the GFX, I found that there was an adapter for a 4x5 system. It just gives you so many different options for the use cases with with photographing, and that's why I love the 4x5 system. It's got its quirks. It's not the most straightforward thing to use. It's very cumbersome. However, you don't have to develop film. You don't have to go through the process of going through chemicals or finding a lab that can process your sheets of 4x5 film that can be very expensive. The trade-off with that is that on the GFX system, since it is a medium format sensor, and it's not quite a medium format film size sensor, it's a little smaller than 645, that means it doesn't cover the projected image from the 4x5 system. You have to stitch about 3 to 9 photos, 3, 6, or 9 photos. What that allows you to do is it allows you to pretty much scan the whole 4x5 image plane, essentially giving you a 4x5 camera photo. The 4x5 system is your ability to switch up the elements used on a lens board here. So this is obviously a lens pair. This is how it's intended to be used with its proper front and rear elements. The other thing you can do is actually mix and match elements to yield interesting results, and kind of opens more doors for creative exploration, which I think is one of the best things about the 4x5 system and adapting lenses. So this setup here is actually a 90mm f8 ultra wide lens. The 90mm on the 4x5 system I think is around a 21 to 28mm, equivalent to 35mm systems. So I have the 90mm up front here, and on the rear I actually have a Nikon 135 rear element. And the reason I did that is because the wide angle lenses, they just don't work with this setup. The bellows, comparatively to the image plane, so where the sensor is on the GFX, which is way back here, the bellows have to close all the way on the 4x5 camera, and your focus range is about this far away from the front element of the lens. To have used the 90mm for architecture and other applications where I needed a very wide field of view. So you're kind of stuck with the 135 to and beyond range of lenses. But with this setup here, this ended up being really fascinating in the way that it works. It has this wonderful kind of like swirly out of focus areas, the bokeh areas. It has its limited use cases, but I think it yields really interesting results, which I'll post up here, as well as the images taken today with the standard 210mm. So unfortunately it is still raining out here. That is to be expected during the winter in Grays Harbor. We're on the Little Hoquiam River now. We were on the East Hoquiam earlier. Here I have this really nice holly tree, or holly bush rather, and we're going to be photographing that since the sky and the mucky water is not looking so hot today. So I think this would be a great opportunity to show you how this close focuses and some of the effects that the different lenses have, other than the standard landscape long focal lengths that we were using earlier in the day. So I have the 90mm f8 with the Nikon 135 element on the rear to give me some more depth of field, and so I can actually use this wide angle lens. The wide angle lens in this case is not going to be used to shoot a wide angle. However, it gives me a larger field of view when close focusing. It will yield a really interesting result when I shoot the berries on this holly tree. So with the hoodie off now, you can see the setup. I also think this is a good opportunity to show how the image stitching mechanism works on here, since I didn't get to show that at the last spot when we got rained out, unfortunately. So let's go ahead and dive in to see how this setup works. Okay, so now we are behind the lens here of the GFX and 4x5 setup, and I have my composition here all ready to go, and our exposure looks nice. So right now, as you can see here, I'm actually going to get a little closer. You can see these 3 dots here, and that's actually where you're going to be lining up for your stitching. So what I'm going to do is bring this down and we're all good to go. So take the first shot there, and then I'm going to slide this over to the second dot, and I'll get in and closer here so you can see that. Now we are on the left side, and that gives us a little more room on the left side here. I'm not sure if you can see the screen or not, but we'll take our second shot. And then finally, we'll move to our third shot here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is, and this is optional since that just created an 85 by 44 millimeter image, and that's a very usable image on this system. So now I just moved the front element group right here with these knobs up about a quarter of the way. So what that's going to do is allow me to take 3 more images and stack those on the top of the images I've already taken, and it's going to give me that larger projected image as though I'm actually shooting on a 4x5 camera. So now we can jump into Lightroom and I can show you guys exactly how to stitch these images together and the kind of results that we're going to see with this kind of setup. Alright, so now that we're back at my computer here, I am going to go ahead and start the process of stitching these photos together to create a final image. First, you're going to want to go ahead and load up your images into whatever editing software you prefer. I prefer Lightroom and the Adobe suite. It works for me. I've been using it for years. So I have my images loaded up here. I have a pretty, well, I was going to say a pretty basic edit on there, but I actually think I overworked this a little too much, which later on I might come back and dial it in a little more. But this is what we're going to be working with here. It was pretty dark out, not a whole lot of light to work with. I'm not too happy with all this information going on. I think it's a little overcrowded, even just in this one frame. So let's see. So once you have like kind of a base edit on there, what you're going to do is you're going to select your images that you want to be processed and stitched. You're going to go ahead and click Edit in Adobe Photoshop. Lightroom and Photoshop communicate together, and you can merge your images into a panorama using that option there. And our images are loaded up here. So we have our 6 images because I shot 6 frames, 3 upper, 3 lower, and you can go ahead and click OK. So I keep that on auto. It seems to do a pretty good job. I also like to turn on these options, the vignette removal, geometric distortion, content aware fill, transparent areas. It just creates a more seamless image in my opinion. I've tried the options both on and off, but definitely keep blend images together. That's a major point. So once you have your options selected, you click OK and it'll start to process. And since I've already worked with this image, I already have together, so I'm just gonna go ahead and click cancel. And it'll work itself, and here's your image. It'll give you about 7 layers of masking that you can you know, go through and see where it's masked off areas and try to, you know, seamlessly stitch everything together and to the best of its ability, and it does a really good job. And then it spits out a master file to kind of round everything off. In my situation, creating a 3.6 gigabyte file, and after deleting those masking layers, the file size significantly becomes smaller. So instead of a 3.6 gigabyte file, now I have a 1.1 gigabyte file. You can go ahead and save the file. It will save with all the edits that it's done in Photoshop back into Lightroom as a TIFF file. So you still have a little wiggle room after you've created the stitch as far as editing goes. It seems to work for me that way. You kind of have to feel out what works for you and what doesn't. This method seems to work for me, albeit I've only really been messing around with this for about a week or two. So the next image that I shot were these really awesome holly bushes right on the bank of the Little Hoquiam River. And for this image, I used the Frankenstein setup here that I have with a ultra wide element up screwed on the front here with a standard element screwed on the rear of this lens. The results, as you can see, give you something pretty unique and interesting that it's doing here with the out of focus areas. Overall, what this Frankenstein lens setup is giving me is a really unique characteristic in the optics here and what it's projecting onto the sensor. Our histogram is nice and full. Our exposure is great. I'm just really liking the energy that's going on in this one. So I did the same process in Photoshop. I selected all of my images and then merged them into a panorama. And this is our final result for this image here. I really love the energy that's going on in this one. I know it's not the aspect ratio of 4:5. I think one of the cool things about this setup, using the GFX with the large format adapter, is that it kind of gives you some wiggle room to play around with the projected image there on the 4:5. And I guess if you want to call this a native crop, that would be sort of true. So right here, this is essentially an 85 by 44 millimeter aspect ratio, which is a really interesting aspect ratio. I think it kind of has this anamorphic quality to it, kind of cinematic maybe. And I'd be curious to try more compositions with this setup. I don't know, there's something really interesting about what this lens setup is doing, and I'm very curious to explore the kind of possibilities that it has for work in the future here. I think it's definitely something that's going to be on the front of the camera pretty often. And from here, honestly, I'm pretty happy with the way this looks. So this is my final image. I think I'm really happy with the way that this one turned out. Not too stoked on our first composition. I think I overworked it in the edit, and I don't think I took enough time working the scene. I was a little flustered earlier, mainly because, well, this is my first crack at making YouTube videos, or making videos about equipment in general. I would love to make more in the future because today I had a whole lot of fun. And I think I was trying to juggle a lot of things all at once, and especially with trying to film a video and create compositions, and then also think about what I'm going to say and talk about, has been a really humbling experience today. And I hope in the future, as I make more content here, that things will be a little more streamlined, and hopefully maybe a little more cohesive, as far as so I had a lot of fun today showing you guys some fun equipment that I've been using recently to make work. I think this setup is a little goofy, it's pretty cumbersome. I don't think it's all that practical. However, I think the images that can be made from it are highly unique, and there's a lot of potential there if you spend some time working with it, and it requires a lot of patience, I think, to kind of use this method to make images. It's very similar to shooting film, in the sense that the process is very slow.
very methodical, very technical. If you forget a step, your image probably won't come out well. You know, creating compositions is pretty difficult because of the limitations in which the sensor on this camera can capture. So it's kind of hard to get a sense of what you're looking at when going out to shoot with this setup. I think something that could be beneficial if you are somebody who happens to be using this setup for whatever reason is to use the ground glass to first compose and make sure, you know, your edges are nice and you're getting everything that you want in frame and everything that you don't want out of frame, which I think is kind of what happened today in that composition of the river. I just wasn't really aware of what the full composition, what the full scene is actually going to end up looking like, because of how this sensor shows on the back here. So definitely takes some time, definitely takes some practice, but I think, as you can see, the results are quite unique and a whole lot of fun, and I had a lot of fun today sharing this process with you guys. Stay tuned for more content in the future. I had a lot of oh, okay, this is hard. Anyways,